Thanks for your support as channel member, Callum! Hello folks and welcome to the biggest project on the channel to date so far. I've turned the F1 grid on its head in a very special video that I hope you really enjoy. Let me know in the comments if you think this is something we can see more of in F1 Manager 24, because they've got the simulate race button. It will be much easier and much quicker for me to put videos like this together. So I'm going to stop talking and we'll dive straight on into this very special video. I turned the F1 grid on its head by putting the highest rated drivers in the slowest cars and the lowest rated drivers in the fastest ones. Using my database editor, I put the drivers into their new teams. Here's the inverted grid in full. Oscar Piastri and Logan Sargent have landed themselves a Red Bull drive. I'll be using Sauber, meaning my driver lineup has gone from Bottas and Zhou to Hamilton and Verstappen. I'll be writing the script for this as I go along, and while Piastri and Sargent do have the fastest car, I'm not sure either of them will win the championship. I'm expecting Albon and Hülkenberg to be up there challenging for the title, and perhaps Yuki Tsunoda. Who do you think will win the championship? Leave your predictions in the comments below right now. Off we went to the season opener in Bahrain, where it was Alex Albon's Ferrari on pole position, ahead of Hülkenberg and Piastri. Leclerc impressed, getting the AlphaTauri to P11, while Hamilton and Verstappen shared the back row. The lights went out for the first race of the season and it was Hülkenberg who grabbed the lead from second on the grid. However, he soon lost the lead to Piastri, who gave it back by going off track. Hülkenberg and Albon then clashed at turn 4, both surviving without damage. The German would go on to seal not just his first podium, but his maiden F1 win for Aston Martin, ahead of Sargent's Red Bull and the Haas of Valtteri Bottas. Bottas' new teammate Pierre Gasly made great progress to 6th, while Carlos Sainz scored debut points for Williams. Verstappen got the early advantage over Hamilton, finishing 17th. It was another Albon pole in Jeddah, but this time the Thai driver converted it into victory. Sargent picked up another second place for Red Bull as Hülkenberg took 3rd. Verstappen again beat Hamilton in their fight to avoid the wooden spoon. After 2 rounds, Hülkenberg, Sargent and Albon are separated by just 5 points at the top of the championship, with Red Bull the lead constructor. A race of absolute chaos came next in Australia as the championship leaders all did their best to give the others a helping hand. Logan Sargent was the first to crash out because he randomly just turned left. Then Hülkenberg and Tsunoda collided while leading for Aston Martin. Next, Lance Stroll literally drove his Alpine into the barriers. Championship leader Hülkenberg continued his crash-tastic race by getting together with Leclerc's AlphaTauri. Piastri then used his Red Bull as a weapon to send Albon to Narnia. Before Hülkenberg decided it was 3rd time lucky in retiring from the race with another turn 3 crash. Eventually it came down to home hero Daniel Ricciardo and Tsunoda on the final lap, with this battle to the line. And despite all the chaos, Hamilton and Verstappen still managed to finish outside the points. The Japanese driver's win saved Aston Martin's blushes and helped keep his teammate top of the standings, as the Silverstone-based team moved to the lead of the Constructors' Championship. In Azerbaijan, Verstappen secured our best qualifying result so far. He put the car an incredible 6 on the grid for the sprint, and the Dutchman secured our first points of the year, finishing the race in 6th. Zhou won the sprint for Ferrari. In the race, Piastri crashed early, bringing out the red flag, and in the closing laps, Lewis was charging towards Max's P10 on a 2-stop strategy, but he wasn't able to pass his teammate. Overall, a successful weekend for the team as we finally got off the mark. Tsunoda took his 2nd win in a row, heading an Aston Martin 1-2, meaning he edged ahead of his teammate to lead the drivers' standings. Our qualifying heroics continued in Miami as Hamilton qualified 3rd. Lewis scythed past Sargent at the start and later took the lead from Hülkenberg. I missed the replay, but here's Lewis opening up a 2-second lead. On lap 30 though, a red flag was caused by this pile-up, wrecking our medium-hard medium strategy in the process. Lewis restarted 2nd but lost the place to Hülkenberg, and while we did drop as low as 4th, this move on Albon helped us retain P3. Hülkenberg won ahead of Sargent, but Lewis and Max came home an outrageous 3rd and 4th. Get in there, lads! Hülkenberg resumed his championship lead as Hamilton and Verstappen each jumped up several places, and Sauber are now 7th in the Constructors. Alex Albon returned to the top step of the podium at the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix in a Ferrari 1-2 ahead of championship leader Hülkenberg. And Ferrari locked out the front row in Monaco, where Max saw his race come to an early end. But it was Zhou Guanyu who followed in the footsteps of Olivier Panis and Jarno Trulli by taking his first Grand Prix win on the streets of the Principality. Lewis rescued our day, narrowly missing out on P6 at the end. The 6 points for 7th moved Sauber above Mercedes. Just let that sink in for a moment. Check out this weird glitch with the tyres on the grid in Spain. Has anyone seen that before? Anyway, Verstappen had another early DNF thanks to this collision with Leclerc. It did bring Hamilton into the fight for points though, which was handy. Red Bull's crash build continued mounting up as Logan Sargent torpedoed George Russell, who gave the most underwhelming response.
Really?
Albon took his 3rd win of the season and the championship lead ahead of Zhou and Piastri. Hülkenberg was only 7th, behind Hamilton. Lewis bagged 6th with this sensational final 2 laps, overtaking 3 cars and almost beating Fernando Alonso. He moves into the top 10 of the Drivers' Championship as Ferrari take the Constructors' lead. Albon won again in Canada, holding off Tsunoda in a sprint to the line after a late safety car, although Zhou had been comfortably leading up until that point. What caused that safety car? This. But it did benefit Max as he rose 12 places to eventually finish 7th. We harboured hopes of a win in the Austria sprint, having qualified 2nd to Bottas, but we immediately lost 2nd to Albon. He went on to win the race, although Sargent gave him a run for his money on the last lap. Verstappen eventually came home in 5th. In the Grand Prix, Lewis made up 5 places on lap 1 at turn 3, but that was as good as things got for us as we paid the price for underfueling the cars. Both cars ran dry on the penultimate lap. I mean, it wouldn't be an AHGP save without the cars running out of fuel now, would it? Anyway, Tsunoda won the race, bringing an end to Ferrari's run of wins. Logan Sargent took pole position at Silverstone as Red Bull locked out the front row for the first time this season. Championship leader Albon started 7th. Hamilton qualified 7th, but we took a new engine and ERS for him, so he started at the back. Tsunoda claimed another win ahead of Albon and Sargent, who were racing to the line. This collision between Zhou and Piastri meant they both had to pit, handing Hamilton 4th as he stormed through the field to the acclaim of the British public.
We were P4.
Almost halfway through the season, Albon holds a 7-point lead over Tsunoda. Hülkenberg's early form has evaporated and Red Bull's drivers have underwhelmed with their machinery. The Haas duo of Gasly and Bottas are performing well and Hamilton is back in the drivers' top 10. Norris and Alonso have the upper hand on their respective teammates, while George Russell is yet to score for McLaren. They prop up the constructors' table, with Ferrari and Aston Martin growing a new rivalry in the sport, and Sauber have become a top 5 team again. Off to Hungary next, and title rivals Tsunoda and Albon battle through the opening corners, the Japanese driver edging into the lead. Albon lost P2 with this lockup before Verstappen was involved in this incident, bringing out the red flags. Albon's teammate Zhou was the big benefactor from the stoppage, restarting in 2nd and going on to claim an important victory. Championship leader Albon finished in 2nd with Tsunoda 3rd, the tie extending his lead to 10 points. As for us, Hamilton stormed through the field on soft tyres in his final stint, making this pass on Hülkenberg for an eventual P4. Rain arrived early during the Belgium sprint, and through the mad dash for intermediates, we emerged in the lead with Lewis. Zhou then dented his title hopes with this accident, and it came down to a last lap shootout between Hamilton and Red Bull's Piastri, the more experienced driver coming out on top. So yes, we won a race with Sauber. It meant we started on pole for the Grand Prix, but we were unable to convert it into victory. That went to Oscar Piastri, who claimed his maiden win at the same circuit as Michael Schumacher. Albon extended his championship lead with a 2nd place finish, as we settled for 3rd. This race in the Netherlands was crazy. Piastri looked set to add a 2nd win to his tally as Red Bull led comfortably, but then the McLarens had this wild crash bringing out a red flag. Piastri's race then came to an end when he clashed with Tsunoda. Why the cars seemed to accelerate towards the barriers I have no idea, but this left title rivals Albon and Tsunoda at the front, with the tie coming out on top in the end. For us at Sauber, Lewis came through the field late on with soft tyres again. He finished 5th and Max finished 7th at his home race. There were hopes of a home win for Ferrari as Albon started on pole position in Italy, but they evaporated when the championship leader crashed out. That left Piastri and Hülkenberg fighting over the win, But this collision between the pair caused a red flag that brought everyone into contention for victory. We'd given Max a new engine for this race and he threatened to get on the podium, and eventually it came down to this scrap between Piastri and Ocon, with the Frenchman claiming his second career win. Albon wasn't punished for his error, as Tsunoda only finished 8th. Piastri did go on to claim his second win of the season in Singapore, from last on the grid no less. There was a number of virtual safety cars, a safety car and rain, but still that is insane. Tsunoda closed the gap slightly on Albon, finishing second. It's down to 15 points. And Tsunoda closed the gap again in his home race at Suzuka, although he and Albon struggled to finishing 7th and 8th. Piastri claiming his third win from the last 4 races in a Red Bull 1-2. And incredibly, both title challengers had issues in the Qatar sprint. First, Tsunoda spun while ahead of Albon, then the championship leader suffered a puncture late on. That meant the pair started the race 14th and 19th, and Tsunoda needed to capitalise on his opportunity to close the gap. A dominant Piastri took victory in both the sprint and the Grand Prix, as the title rivals finished 5th and 7th, meaning the gap between them was now down to just 9 points. Albon and Tsunoda went head to head in the sprint race in Texas. They duked it out with the Ferrari coming out on top. And in the Grand Prix, Albon was leading by a couple of seconds from his Japanese rival when this happened. Albon went on to score a crucial victory, his 6th of the season, ahead of teammate Zhou in a Ferrari 1-2, and it opened his title lead to a massive 35 points. It was a Ferrari front row lockout in Mexico, but both drivers had grid penalties, meaning Carlos Sainz was on pole for Williams. But his chances of a memorable win went out the window when he crashed into Logan Sargent fighting over the lead on lap 8. And even though that collision put Tsunoda into the lead, he had no answer to the speed of the Ferraris. They came through the pack to win the race, Zhou cruising home to score his 3rd win for the Scuderia. Albon moved closer to the title with 2nd, ahead of Tsunoda. But there was some joy for Williams as Norris finished 4th and Sauber picked up a double points finish. The championship leader was battling Lando Norris for the lead of the sprint in Brazil when they collided, handing the win to Tsunoda, which meant Albon finished only 5th. And after an early safety car in the race, Lewis found himself leading because most of the field pitted. And because Bottas was slow in the Haas, Lewis built a 5-second lead after the restart. It meant that as the final round of pit stops began, Lewis was less than 10 seconds off the lead. His progress was then aided by this Ricciardo lockup. A virtual safety car was called on lap 46, a bit earlier than planned for Lewis, but he went to the soft tyres nonetheless, returning to the track in 4th. Another critical Tsunoda error meant Albon had one hand on the driver's title, as he led a Ferrari 1-2 to the finish, ahead of Lewis in 3rd. Albon's victory secured the constructors' title for Ferrari, while Lewis was able to pick up another podium. Albon's 47-point lead heading to Vegas meant he could clinch the title with a race to spare, and Tsunoda had to win to stand any chance of taking it to the final round. Albon qualified on the front row alongside Max, but both had grid penalties. However, Tsunoda could only muster 12th on Friday night. With all the penalties applied, Albon still started 4th and he was soon fighting Magnussen for the lead. Lewis then crashed for no reason, ending his race early, and as the race wore on, Verstappen, who had a fresh power unit, moved into the battle for the lead. But in typical Sauber style, our pit stop was terrible, and that surely seemed the end of our victory hopes. But with 5 laps to go, Max had caught champion-elect Albon, and by the time we started the final lap, he was ahead. We eventually held off Albon to score an unthinkable victory, as Albon settled for P2 and the World Championship. There were celebrations at both ends of the pit lane as Ferrari celebrated another Drivers' Champion, and Sauber scored their first win since 2008 with Robert Kubica. For the final round in Abu Dhabi, Albon and Tsunoda started on the front row of the grid, but the tyres' hopes of ending the year with a win were dented by this crash with Sargent. Ferrari did still take the win as Zhou claimed his 4th win of the year ahead of Max. Lewis came home 4th, having started 15th. The prancing horse ended this season very much on top. So Albon clinched his maiden title by 37 points, eventually ahead of his teammate Zhou Guanyu. And after an impressive start, Hulkenberg finished almost 200 points behind. In the heavily upgraded Sauber, Lewis beat Max by 24 points despite the Dutchman's win in Vegas. Ferrari won both championships as Sauber were 4th, improving on 2022's 6th place finish. McLaren and AlphaTauri struggled despite their improved driver lineups. Who impressed you most during this experiment and who should have done better? So there you go, Alexander Albon is a world champion with Ferrari. I'm just having a look at the screenshot here of the final standings in the Drivers' Championship. Honestly, really surprised that Hulkenberg's season fell apart in the way that it did. Tsunoda, it's just classic him in the game, isn't it? Those mistakes were completely his undoing towards the end of the season. I thought Zhou drove really well actually for much of the season. Got a few impressive victories, especially around Monaco. Just one Mercedes in the top 10. Kevin Magnussen only 16th for Mercedes. Lando Norris in 11th with Williams. That is seriously impressive. And Carlos Sainz also showing just how good he is with 15th with that car. But Lance Stroll in 14th. Really underperforming compared to his teammate. Ocon had 166 points. Stroll just 60. So that shows you kind of where he's at. Obviously, Russell, Alonso, Leclerc, Perez, all race winners and a world champion in Fernando Alonso, really struggling because their machinery was just so bad. So they couldn't really make the difference there. And they also didn't do radical development like we did at Sauber. So, Hamilton and Verstappen, that was very interesting. Verstappen completely undermined by the fact that he got involved in crashes early in the season. So, that was his undoing in that respect. But a fun video to put together. I really enjoyed it. As I said at the start of the video, let me know if you think this is something we can have more of on the channel. It'll certainly be more possible with the simulating race button for F1 Manager 24. And yeah, thanks for watching. You're the best fans. I'll see you in the next video. It's bye for now.